let's talk about the Wizards, a team that needs a lot of help. Is all I'm gonna
Needs
say.
a lot of building.
So can I just read you a contract?
Mm-hmm.
Someone on this roster, Jordan Poole. I'm gonna tell you what he's making. He's got 3 more seasons under contract. Okay. Next year, age 25, making $29.6 million, 21% of the cap. Year after that, age 26, $31.8 million. That is 20.5% of the cap. And age 27, $34.0 million, 19.95% of the cap. Mm-hmm. This team will not be good over those next 3 years, would also be my guess. I don't really see a path here where this team is like I don't know what the path forward here is for a lot of reasons, but I start with just I understand how they end up with Jordan Poole and all of this. That is the contract I want least on my books. There's no way to trade it. There's no way you can. I don't see a path to turning him into a reclamation project for another team at this point.
No.
And there's I look at this roster, Brendan, and it's even Kuzma. Kuzma's the one guy in this roster, maybe a Kispert, you could tell me is tradable to another team on the fringes, but this roster is devoid of much of anything, and it's to me Poole is emblematic of that because he is your highest earning guy, and he's a clear negative on a team that I don't think has any identity or anything going for it in a real positive way right now.
Yeah, I think you're, first of all, we're in full agreement on Poole. He's far and away, without a doubt, the single most, the worst contract in the NBA. And truly, genuinely, because of the level to which he's involved, has a case to be made as one of the most damaging players in the entire NBA. So that is a pretty wild combination to be making enough money to count as one of the worst contracts and actually be one of the worst players. Because you and I had a debate about Beal and Towns and which one of those is more toxic and whatever else. And I think it's, Beal because of the no trade clause and the injuries and everything else. But Beal can go get you 30 efficiently and defend a little and pass. He's not great. He's overpaid, but he is a good player in a vacuum. Poole is not even that. So that's going to be a little bit of an anchor weighing them down for sure. I wouldn't go so far as to say they can't be good through the duration of that contract, especially because by the last year you could just buy him out, or some team will take him at that point because he's expiring and they'll just buy him out. And so you're talking about 2 years, and maybe they're not good for those 2 anyway, but that was probably baked into the whole plan here. And that's where I come back to, I think you're a little more down on their kind of overall vision or future because, how would you have felt, I guess, to go back to a team we just talked about in that finals discussion, were the Mavs before they got Luka anything great? Well, no, but then they got Luka. So it just takes that. They have the 2nd overall pick this season. They'll probably be in position to get Cooper Flagg or whoever else next summer this time. So that's where they are. They're choosing to be in a position to tank, to bottom out, and to accumulate assets to both draft high and get that player in the draft, or maybe if somebody would ever stay in Washington, D.C., trade for that player or trade for the co-pilot to that star that they get in the draft or whatever else. We've seen this before. It's the best way to kind of start over. I think there's nothing that's super problematic about it to me. And I do think they have some assets that are desirable around the NBA beyond how awful Poole is. And yeah, the Kuzma part of it. Kuzma's on a great contract. Kuzma's making significantly less than that Poole contract you just read off, and it goes down. So a contender that is kind of, one of those teams we just talked about, looking for how to tinker and how to change things up, I could see Kuzma being very desirable, and we've already seen him in a smaller role on a different team. Somehow 29, that's pretty crazy. But Denny Avdia to me, Chris, is somebody I would be looking really hard. I think he's, last year in particular, looked like a whole new player and really, really is an offensive weapon in a way that he wasn't before, and just feels comfortable and confident, feels like he's kind of hitting his stride as an NBA guy. And then Tyus Jones. I don't personally see a reason to keep Tyus Jones because he is theoretically this kind of floor raiser on offense, and yet they had the worst offense in the league most of last season by a significant margin, so why keep him around? what's the point of having a 28-year-old point guard if the offense is still going to suck because the rest of the talent is just so bad? So I know he's an unrestricted free agent. He could just leave, but could you get a, sign and trade going, or do you just re-sign him and then look to deal him at the deadline or something else? I think they have some assets. I think they'll be able to make some positive value trades, and then it's just how do you keep getting assets, and what does that look like?
I think that's all the summer should be about. It's like I frankly don't care what their record is next year at all. I think to your point, win 9 games. That's great. Maybe develop some habits. Maybe I remember reading a quote. I can't remember who the quote was from. It might have been from Landry Shamet. Good for Landry Shamet making non-guaranteed $11 million next year. Mm-hmm. But I think he talked about like how the vibes under their new head coach, whose name I'm going to be honest, I already forgot the name of their new head coach, Brian Keefe. Like the vibes were better. They're excited about the future. Then like it was like better with him, and like maybe that's like enough for a year. You know, I struggle for like
I think
a real.
You sometimes come when we talk about these things. It's like, you know, the point of every team season is not to go win games, and then we talk about a team where that's not the goal, and then you like look at it through that lens. No one is sitting in Washington feeling like if they don't win 40 games, they've failed. What do you think this is supposed to look like? They chose this, and everybody gave them a big old pat on the back. They got rid of Beal. They moved off all these Porzingis, and they got Kuzma back on a reasonable salary, and they took picks back to get Poole, and they hired smart people from the Clippers. Like, but now it's a failure because like we don't think they're going to win.
True.
Well, I mean, of course they're not going to win. They don't want to win. No one thinks they're going to win.
Here's my trepidation, I think, as I kind of dive into it. I can compare it to some of the other teams, and maybe this isn't fair vis-a-vis like the Hornets, who I don't think are in a particularly great spot either right now. I just like really need to the next 2 years of talent acquisition is going to tell me what else is going to come, because like aside from like Koulibaly, who like showed some flashes last year, it's just like I think this like Johnny Davis is not anyone that I'm caring about. Like the rest of this roster just does not matter.
Koulibaly is the only player on this team that I think has a chance to be on it beyond that Poole contract that you mentioned. Yeah, absolutely. And like that to me is like the scary part of this, is like you have just so much work to do. And it's like how you approach that this summer. It's like, is there like someone on, even if it's Kuzma, you know, is it Avdia, like whoever it is, I would be, if there's a lottery ticket guy on another team you are mildly interested, I'd be trying to flip that for another young guy like that to try to do something like that. I think that's be the Josh Giddey team, right? Or whatever.
Even if the Giddey team means you have to extend him, I don't even think I care. I think I would just do it and see what happens. Like, what's the risk?
Yeah, no.
Anyway.
Exactly. I mean, I think, like, okay, they have the number 2 overall pick. We talked a little bit about that with Zach to close out the show here in a moment, and they're probably in position to get somebody that they might like, right? He could be the next, in addition to Koulibaly. Okay, these are our 2 guys. I mean, but you got to draft well, right? I mean, I think, like, to me, it's the difference between, you know, a very forgotten part of NBA history that I'm not going to blame anybody for, but a lot of other teams tried to hire their version of Sam Hinkie during that stretch like a decade ago, and I saw it here in Phoenix. The Suns swung and missed on everybody but Devin Booker, and he basically rescued them because they got 1 pick right late in the middle of the first round. But Orlando, remember Rob Hennigan? Anybody remember that guy's name? No, because he sucked at what he was trying to do. They failed. They did not make the right draft picks. They did not make the right moves to put themselves into position to get a Booker or an Embiid or whoever you want to point to. You have to nail that. I'm not trying to like yada over like nailing the picks, but I think most Wizards fans probably feel a little closer to building a great team than they did when their books were stuffed with John Wall and Marcin Gortat and now Porzingis and Beal last year and Russell Westbrook for a minute. Like, no one thought anything was that was just like Ted Leonsis being a cheap ass. This is at least something.
The other thing that I think we will learn this year, I would say, is with Brian Keefe, what is he as a player development coach, and like what does this actually look like with a full year? Because I think like the thing that other teams that frankly have more draft picks and maybe more interesting young talent as well, that those teams did well. I would say Will Hardy, Mark Dagnall, obviously, but he maybe just had better talent to work with, and obviously it hasn't worked with everyone there. With Dieng hasn't worked, Giddey hasn't totally worked. Those guys accelerated those teams, I think, in part because of the coaching job they did. That's kind of part of his assignment here long term. I think Kenny Atkinson did this really well in Brooklyn way back when. Like, that is kind of the job as a steward of this kind of team, is to help them accelerate over time. I think as we get a rhythm for this team over the course of the year, we're going to learn if he's that kind of guy for this team as well, I think, is the other part of this, which will be kind of interesting to see, because I don't think anyone really has anyone. Like, it's hard to have a feel for a coach in general until you actually see them like do the head coaching job thing, even if you're like familiar with their name, if they're a big assistant.
Well, he was he was the interim last year, but they were like a weird mishmash of talent, So I don't even know if we'll get a feel for that this year. It's hard.
Yeah, but I think this year, at least with a full lot, like you might get a better feel this full time through than you might have last year when it was like by the time you took over, it's like, why are you watching the Wizards? I'm not really sure why anyone was watching the Wizards.
I mean, to me, they have 26 as well from the Clippers and 51 in the draft. So I'm not saying, like, they traded up for Koulibaly last year, and I think that's the other ingredient here that I think, it's part of what I criticized, again, kind of covering one of these tanking teams up close in Phoenix for a while, that I always criticize not only the Suns, but any team that kind of dipped their foot into that water is you have to really go for it. And part of that is being okay sacrificing roster spots to undrafted free agents, second-round picks, not necessarily somebody with the pedigree of Giddey, but maybe even another team's, like how the Thunder got Isaiah Joe from Philly. Guys like that, where maybe they were second-round picks who had a little bit of promise somewhere, but you don't really know if they're going to be good. Try that. And maybe your roster spots 9 through 15 are all those guys, and maybe 5 of them suck. But getting as many of those players in the building and giving them reps and giving them minutes and trying to develop them, you're going to hit on 1 or 2 over the course of 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And that's the difference between hitting like the Thunder have, or, again, the Magic, the Suns, whatever one you want to point to from that stretch of time. So I would be maybe trading back into the second round or buying a second-round pick from some team or doing things like that just to get some random prospect in there that maybe ends up being like a bench guard for you out of nowhere. And, who cares if Johnny Davis leaves the team or they don't have, a spot for like Landry Shamet, like you said, or Marvin Bagley. I have no reason for those guys to be on my team and getting minutes.
$12.5 million for Marvin Bagley. It's incredible stuff. I know that wasn't their contract, but it's just like funny that like the contracts
but in some like
are wild.
Exactly. In some, like, if you're tank, be all in, do everything that it takes, and actually take those bites at the apple. That's what Sam Hinkie's whole thing was once upon a time. It wasn't just be bad. He was getting the... How many guys in the league right now started on the TJ McConnell, who we all just, slobbered all over for a month?
Apparently the Pacers wanted to be a Pacer for the rest of its career. Just like that's the energy now. Amazing stuff for TJ McConnell.
Yeah, great. Dario Saric had a nice season in Golden State. He started there. Robert Covington, was injured, but he started there. Like, all these guys, Jeremy Grant, be that team and find those guys. That's really going to be the difference. So that'd be my last kind of note. Take the Giddies, sure, but also take the random guys we've never heard of, and maybe they become something.
Let me ask you one last hypothetical before we get to our draft part of the show in full. Let's just say a team loves a Klingon, has a prospect they love. Would you, if a team wanted to come up to 2, and he was going to give you their pick in this draft that's a little lower, maybe in like the 6 to 9 range, somewhere in there, and future stuff, would that interest you for where you're at?
Sure. I mean, I'm saying yes. I'm considering everything if I'm them. I think that's the beauty of having kind of the full freedom here, then finally embracing a rebuild is you could trade up like they did for Koulibaly if the value's right. You could trade back and get somebody you like and get an extra pick if that makes sense. So I'm not saying no to anything. I don't know who they like. I don't really think fit matters for their roster right now. So take a player if you like him. If they feel like somebody's so great that they have to get him at 2, then so be it. But sure, get an extra first round pick, get unprotected pick or whatever it looks like. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see what they do. The more we talk about this, I didn't think I was going to get excited about the Wizards to have. I gotta hit the over. Rashawn Holmes on the roster with a player option for $12 million, $12.8 million to be exact. But I think he's picking that up.
I'm gonna go ahead and lock that in. Yeah. We'll build that into our projections for their cap space. $64 million could have been 76, but unfortunately, last second decision. Rashawn has chosen to make $13 million rather than 0 this season.